We try to get away from our slip fit bearings anymore. Our old bikes used to have slip fit. Our old like Vision Fitness equipment and stuff like that always had slip fit. The problem with slip fit bearings is they'll use green Loctite to lock them in place, but if that, like especially in an elliptical, because it gets so many forces here in the length of these arms, if that green Loctite starts to powderize, okay, and the bearing starts to move in the frame, you're talking about frame damage, okay? And that's basically the old system was frame damage. With the new press fit bearings, the engineers all went to press fit. Field serviceability got taken away, okay? But the longevity, you know, outweighs the fact of how many you have to do. Now, if you ever have to replace this bearing, there's a kit, okay? Basically, you would take this out. The kit comes with the flywheel, the bearing that's already pressed on the shaft, okay, and then a free bearing, which would be loose in the box for the other side. There's also a special tool, okay, that actually draws the bearing in. But what happens is I have this pulley with an axle on it and a bearing, right? And I take it, and there'll be two plates in there. There'll be two thin plates, little steel plates.
Yes.
They'll be pressed in to support the bearing as I draw it in. So I'll have it, it'll have a plate on it, I'll stick it in there. Now this is in the service manual. I put the special tool, which that part number is in the service manual, and then thread into it, and there's a nut. And then once it's threaded in, I turn that nut, okay, which is gonna draw that bearing in until you can feel it deads out to the bottom. I take the special tool off, I put the bearing back on, the free bearing on, I do the same thing, but now it just presses that bearing in. Once I get done, I take the two plates out, they're two halves, okay? Take them out. Don't worry, if you forget those in there, it makes a hell of a lot of noise and you know that they're in there. You won't forget, okay? Now, this bearing, and I've replaced this bearing before, okay, is a slip fit, all right? But you have to hit it with a hammer. You got to hit this one too to get these bearings out because they're press fit. You can't use a rubber hammer. You can't use a dead blow hammer. You know, the ones that are full of lead, but they're plastic. You have to use a metal hammer.
Okay.
All right. Now I used a really small hammer on that, just to prove a point. It was a small ball peen hammer. It was maybe about a 12 ounce, 16 ounce. It was very small. But once you hit metal on metal and the bearing starts to move, then it's just tap, 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 tap. Okay. But you have to break. They put green Loctite on though, so you have to break that seal first for the bearings to move. There was a guy up in Canada. I told the customer service person how to replace that. And they said, you got to have a metal hammer, or else because he called, he said he couldn't get it out. I said, what are you using? He was using a rubber mallet. I said, you got to use a metal hammer. Okay. So then he called back again and said, it's just not happening. I said, give it to me. I'll call him. Call him up. He said, tell me what you're doing. He says, well, I've been wailing on it. It's not coming out. I said, you're using a metal hammer, right? He says, yeah, I'm using a metal hammer. I'm just not getting it out of there. I'm just like, explain to me. Well, he said, I'm holding a block of wood on the thing. And he said, whoa, you got a block of wood. You got to get rid of the block of wood. He says, but I need it because I can't hear the customers. You know, I'm in the club. They can't hear me beating on this thing. I said, listen, you hit it twice. Once it starts to move, and then you can just tap it out. And so I'm not sure enough. 30 seconds later, he gets back on the phone. Yeah, it came out.
He's just controlling his strength.
He was wailing on it forever. This was like a 2-week long little ordeal, you know. So anyway, metal on metal, get both those parts out. Once that one's out, just clean up that green Loctite with some emery cloth or something, and then the other one will just slide right in. You got to make sure it's straight because if it gets cocked in there, obviously it's harder it'll get jammed, but it's very easy. There's a snap ring here. Take snap ring out. There's snap ring on the other side. Take snap ring out. It'll drive right through.
Do we need to
very
put
simple
grease again, oil or what?
That's up to you. You can use green Loctite again. The one that I fixed, I did not have any, so I did not replace it.
Just clean it up.
Just clean it up so it slides in easier.
Okay. Much better.
But it should be good. There's no weird forces on this. Okay. Now I'm going to show you another little trick. There's 2 tricks. If I have to service this, okay, this is a grooveless pulley.
Okay.
Right? We went grooveless on like everything. Our bikes now have it. The treadmills have it. We used to have a lot of alignment problems. This is the piece of equipment that started the grooveless pulley. Okay.
Okay.
This piece, because this piece would shred belts. The belts would squeak. They'd squawk. They'd do everything.
Yeah, it's crap.
Okay. It was just terrible. They'd break. And it was a thinner belt. It was like a 12 rib. I think it's 14 now. I think it went from a 10 to a 12 to a 14. But there's a lot of pressure on this now, and you can't just use a gauge. And if you did, you'd have to take this off. We use a harmonic gauge now for all of our belts.